Hello, and welcome to Formerly on 4. I'm Jackie Walker, and I was formerly on 4 as an anchor for 40 plus years. But the last couple of years, even though I still work for Channel 4, I've been doing something a little different. I've been writing and reporting and recording formerly on 4 because I want to talk to a lot of the people I used to work with here in the newsroom at Channel 4, and I'd like you to know more about them because we've had great colleagues over the years here. I'm doing this today with the help of my good friend Dan Holland, who is the best when it comes to, technical assistance and vision and editing and all those good things. So with his help, I would like you to say hello once again to Paul Peck.
Hi, Jackie.
Hi,
it's good to
Paul.
be here. It's weird to be back in this building, but it's fun.
Yeah. How many years since you've been gone?
I think it's 13 now since I left. Left in 2012, so we're actually getting closer to 14 now.
It's a
so
long
after having
time.
worked here for 24 years.
24 years. You
Yeah.
and I worked together
Yeah.
here. And during that time, Paul, tell folks what you did.
So I came in 1988 as a 22-year-old. It was essentially my first real job out of college. I had worked outside of New York City previous to that, but this was the first move out of your house, move to a new city kind of job as the sports producer for Van Miller, and then it sort of morphed into getting a chance to be on the air, and then mid-90s went full-time on the air, and then wound up being a full-time sportscaster, sports anchor here, covered the Bills for every game for, 15 years in a row, home and road. So this was a very formative place for me in my life and my career.
I want to talk certainly a little bit later about working with Van Miller, but what are you doing now?
Yeah, so I'm still here in Buffalo, obviously. Part of my association with the University at Buffalo and their athletic programs began when I was still working at Channel 4, did a lot of the football games in the 90s, and then kicked back in 2008 before I kind of transitioned away from Channel 4. So I'm kind of the voice of the Bulls. I do all the football games on the radio. I do all the basketball, men's and women's games on their ESPN Plus broadcasts, coaches' shows, events. They keep me pretty busy over there. It's been going on 25 years of association with the University at Buffalo, and that's a good part of my time, particularly this time of year as we record in February. Then there's a whole bunch of other little freelance projects. I'm the MC of the Greater Buffalo Sports Hall of Fame. Done that for about 10 years. Beat the Champ Bowling Show on the MSG networks. I've hosted that for the last 2 years. And then there's always projects that come up here and around. I've done some ESPN sideline work for ESPN Radio at the Bills games over the last couple of years. I've been able to keep my fingers in the sports world here in Buffalo, which has been great and amazing. It's such a great place to be. I've lived here for getting close to 40 years now. To have been involved in sports for most of that time is very fortunate.
You're credible, Paul. You are credible. Absolutely. You've got your fingers out there in the sports program at UB and have for years, and I see you there a lot. But I'd like you to talk about your family. Tell us about your family.
Well, again, the traces back to this building. I met my wife here. I met my wife who was working here, helping out with the newscasts. That's how we met. There's Kim on the left.
On the left, right.
That's Rachel, our oldest, who lives in New York City with her husband, Liam. And then that's my youngest daughter, Sydney, and her boyfriend, Joe. And everybody's doing great. They live in New York City. They love life down there. They are city people through and through. Sydney is a Hamburg person. Joe's a Buffalo police officer, South Buffalo born and raised. So we've got it on both ends. But everybody is doing great. Family is great. They're living their lives. They're working on their careers. They're off on their own adventures. No grandchildren yet. That's a hint to that my wife probably wanted me to drop in there. But
Okay.
But hey, the families are great. The kids are awesome.
I want to show this picture once again. This one right here.
This was
your
for my
birthday.
60th birthday party in the fall, and
I want people to look at this picture.
they surprised me with a nice little gathering. So
on the far left, though, they will
Yep.
recognize Who is
That
that?
would be Mike Tirico from NBC Sports. We were roommates in college at Syracuse University, and we have been friends to this day, going on a 40-year friendship. And Mike is one of my dearest friends and a guy that I can always, he's hard to get to these days because he's really busy. But if I texted him the other day, I need to call him or text him, and it worked out great. My 60th birthday fell on a Saturday. UB had a home game, and the Bills hosted the Patriots on Sunday night the next day. So Mike was in town anyway
for the game.
NBC Bills Patriots broadcast. So we made it just a crazy fun weekend. So I'm so proud of Mike. And as we record this on the brink of the Super Bowl, he's going to call his first Super Bowl for NBC. And I texted him the other day and just told him how proud I was and how he's taking a little piece of all of us that came up through the ranks at Syracuse that dreamed of being a guy who could call a Super Bowl. Yeah. And here's our guy Mike doing it. He's taking a little piece of all of us with him to Santa Clara to call the Super Bowl. I'm so proud of him. And then he'll hop on a jet and fly to Italy and do the Olympics. He's nuts.
Good for you for putting that perspective in there for him. But these are heady times for him. But I want folks to notice this sports thread all through his life, because in that same picture, you will see your father-in-law and mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Your father-in-law should look familiar to folks.
That is Ed Rutkowski, who played for the Bills and won AFL championships in 1964 and 65 as a wide receiver on those Bills teams, and eventually became county executive. And that's his wife, Mary Lou, sitting in front of him. And that's my wife, Kim, in the pink, and her sister over there on the right, and my sister in the middle there too, and Kim's other sister, Kristen, in the dark. So yeah, it's been a sports thread, right? And again, I didn't grow up here, so when I met Kim, I had no idea who she was or who her family was or who her father was. It strictly was coincidence that I'm a sports person and I marry someone whose father played for the Bills.
You met her in this building.
Yeah, she was working here at Channel 4.
I remember her as an intern here.
Yeah, kind of an intern production assistant. That's how we met. Remember, I was 22 years old when I started working here. So, so she was just finishing up at Buff State, working with you and Bob Coop and Carol Jason and Chris Musial and the whole gang here. And that's how we met. That's
a time.
So our relationship goes back to those very first couple of months when I started working here.
Now, you mentioned all through here, we've talked about Super Bowl, because as we tape this, the Super Bowl is coming up this year. But you and I covered the Bills Super Bowls in different ways.
Oh, yeah.
But we covered Super Bowl 25, 26, 27, 28. And you were with Van.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, remember, I'm only here 2 years. I start in the July of 1988, and the Bills go on that Super Bowl run in the end of 1990, first Super Bowl technically 1991. So it was just a whirlwind. None of us knew what the heck we were doing and how to cover these things. And,
That's true.
And it was crazy. And even in that day when it wasn't 24-hour coverage like it is now, it was a whirlwind, and again, I saw your notes, so I know you're going to yell at me about the Super Bowl 25. And I'm going to defend myself by saying there was no 2 weeks that year. So the Bills beat the Raiders 51-3 in the AFC Championship game on Sunday, and you were already in Tampa. I'm on a flight at 7 a.m. Monday morning with the rest of the crew to get down there. So now you always get the 2 weeks. You get a week to plan, then you travel. This was like a craziness.
Boom, you win and you're in the bowl. Yeah.
Literally, you win and you're 12 hours later, you're on a plane to the Super Bowl. So that's my defense on what you're going to yell at me about.
Let me explain what you're talking about. When we covered our very first Super Bowl here at Channel 4 for the Bills, Super Bowl 25, there was a whole group of us that went down. I don't even know how many of us went down, but I have some pictures of us down there. That was after the Miami game, I think. But or the third Super Bowl. But we went down there and we didn't know anything about the system that you needed a credential to get in. And remember, this was when the Gulf War was happening, so there was heavy security, and you had to have a credential.
There you are in Tampa.
With
this big sombrero.
There I am. There's with Kevin O'Connell. Yep. You had to have a credential to get into the stadium. They had tight security then. And we didn't realize. Now, I wasn't part of the sports team. I was news on my own.
Which
I
means it
all
was your
by
responsibility.
myself, covering for the fans.
I'm defending myself here, Jackie.
No, you were the one in charge of all this, of getting
Yeah, it was me,
credentials.
sure.
Paul didn't get a credential for me and my photographer. So, consequently, I went to the first Super Bowl 25 in Tampa. There's my photographer, Kim Root. She and I had to stay outside the stadium because we never got a credential to get in.
You probably had as much, because the game was projected on the side of a Sears Roebuck. Like, you probably had as much fun being outside. Probably got better stuff anyway.
That's where I watched the Super Bowl.
Yes.
Across the street, there was a mall with a Sears Roebuck. And they were projecting the game onto the side of the building, and that's where Kim and I watched it with 300 Bills fans.
See?
Who
You had a better story
had
anyway.
jumped in their car and gone down there.
Trying over here, Mike.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
trying.
right. Trying to see the game. But anyway, that's my story with Paul. But bottom line, you were with Van Miller for his Super Bowls. He was as much a part of history. And
He was so excited for the first one. It was the pinnacle of his life, right? Like to all those years of calling those games, both good and bad, with the Bills, to go to a Super Bowl. I've never seen a human being more excited about anything in my life than Van at that first Super Bowl. Van always bounced off the walls anyway. He was like a Super Ball bouncing off the walls down there. He was so excited, so happy, making jokes like Van, don't joke in front of the Marines with the submachine guns protecting against the Gulf War. It didn't stop him from just being crazy and nuts. And you know, I could talk about what Van means to me in my life and my career for an hour. And, you know, and I will say this to you, Jackie, not having grown up here, I didn't really know who he was, right? Like I knew of him, but I didn't, when I took the job here, it wasn't like I grew up watching him for the first 20 years of my life. So it was a new experience. And at first you're like, do I want to get involved in this? Like, this guy's crazy. But I don't know that there's ever been a better mentor and friend and influence on me in my life at any other point of it related to broadcasting than Van.
God love Van. Do you find, you're the voice of the Bulls now, the UB Bulls. Do you find that you are taking anything from your years with Van?
All the time.
Yeah.
Particularly, so, you know, again, Van was an amazing character. He was a jokester. He was Dennis the Menace. He would push the limit and get till his hand got slapped. So as a person, he was unbelievable. As a broadcaster, he was even better. As a play-by-play guy, he was one of the greatest. So I always tell people, like, I would sit there between the 6 and 11 o'clock news and ask him questions about being a play-by-play guy, which was literally like sitting next to Picasso while he's painting a masterpiece, right?
Like,
the ability
teach
to
me to
talk
sing like
shop
Pavarotti.
with Van was incredible. And what Van was always great at was capturing the moment, right? When you're a play-by-play guy, you got to get the X's and O's right, the lefts, the rights, the ups, the downs. You got to get those right. The master class of being a great play-by-play guy is capturing the moment and the emotions. Having someone listen to you on the radio while they're driving down the thruway and inch up in their seat because it's one of those moments that they're waiting to hear how it turns out. Nobody did that better than Van, and I always tried to do my best to do that, and I think of Van a lot about, could I have done that better? Could I have captured that moment better? Particularly on radio, right? You know, I do radio play-by-play and I do football and TV play-by-play. Radio, it's all you. It's your voice inflection. It's, if you're excited, your voice rises. That gets people excited, right? If it's a big play, you got to know it's a big play. You got to anticipate it's a big play. Your voice has to reflect that. Nobody was better at that than Van Miller, and to be able to sit and listen to him and talk to him, and even later in his years when he was retired, he would listen to my UB games. He would come in and give me critiques and say, hey, you did this good. You need to work better at this. You got to do better at that. And then inevitably he would turn to the color guy, whomever that might be at one point, whoever I was working with. Tell your color guy's talking too much.
I didn't know that he would come in and critique.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are things about what he did or what any of us do that you can't teach. You have to have it, and you have found over time that you're developing that.
Done 300 plus football games
Yeah.
at UB, right?
Yeah,
That's
let's
a
talk
lot of
about
games,
UB.
and I do. It's one of those skills where you the more you do, the better you get at it. The more comfortable, the more you've seen everything
Yeah.
that comes your way. Play by play is organized chaos, right? It's why I enjoy doing it so much. It's essentially fill the next 2-3 hours. There is no script. We're not going to tell you what's going to happen. Go. And that's an incredible responsibility, but you have to learn how to manage it, and you have to understand the moments and the ebbs and the flows, and you have to understand that when this is a play that you may talk about an hour later as, boy, the game turned on this play, or you have to anticipate what you think is going to happen, and then sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. And and again, I've called the 7 overtime game at UB. Who thought that was going to happen when I walked in the door? I've called the game where a player had 400 yards rushing and 8 touchdowns to tie the NCAA record. Like, you didn't anticipate that when you walked in the door, but you have to be ready for it, and you have to understand and sense what's happening in front of
And
you.
I always say, be ready. But, think about what you do. You do men's games, basketball games. You do women's basketball games. You do UB football.
Yep.
You do wrestling.
Yeah, even wrestling. Yeah.
You have to know all of these things and the intricacies to point out.
Yeah,
on the air.
again, back to Van and a little bit of the era that I grew up in the 70s, where the great sportscasters did everything. Jim McKay would do the Olympics. He'd do skiing one day. He'd do skating the next day. He'd do track and field.
Wide
The
world of
Kurt Gowdys,
sports.
the Dick Enbergs of the world, like the all-time Jack Bucks. They did all sports. So if you're a good sportscaster, you should be able to do anything, right? I always tell people, give me a week to prepare for something that I don't know about, and I'll know the 7 or 8 things that I need to look for and say, and hopefully I'm good enough at what I do that you don't watch and think that I don't know what I'm talking about, because there are a few times, particularly bowling, getting involved in the bowling
I
show
wanna
that you
talk
want to
about
talk
that.
about.
Let's talk
I'm
about
not a
Beat the
bowler. I
Champ.
never was, but you talk to the right people and you learn what to look for. And I just think it's the mark of a good sportscaster that you can do any game, anytime, or you can go do play-by-play of a bunch of kids playing in a playground somewhere.
Good point. But now, Beat the Champ, I want to talk about that. This was Van's purview for
Chuck Healy
years.
and then Van.
Yes.
From the 60s to 1988 on Channel 4.
And then Paul Peck.
So then it goes away. Right at the tail end of when I started here in 1988, it had kind of gone away. And then it comes back on WBBZ thanks to Chris Musial, our old boss, who brings the show back, who wanted me to get involved. And I said, Chris, I'm not really a bowler. I don't really know a lot about bowling. No, you'll be fine. You'll be fine. And I kind of kept putting him off on it. And finally, he kept bugging me. And finally, I said, you know what? Van would be proud of me if I kept his legacy alive. So I'm like, okay, I'll take the challenge. So we did it for 4 years on WBBZ, and then COVID came, the show went away, and then now we're back on MSG Network. Much different show, different folks, different looks, super professional. Same guys that run the show for us on MSG are the ones that run the shows that you see on Fox, ESPN, CBS Sports Network, national PBA shows. So
Are these done, for people who haven't seen it, are these done locally
they
here
are.
in Buffalo?
We do Rochester a little bit. We've gone to Jamestown. We move it around. It goes to a different bowling center every month. We do 4 shows in a day for a month's worth of
4
programming.
shows a day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And guys qualify for it, and then we go in on a Sunday usually and record from about noon to 8 o'clock at night. 4 different 1-hour shows. So
You were saying that there are millions of viewers.
Well, now in this day and age, now the show airs on MSG Network, but it also, after it airs on MSG Network over the weekends, it goes up on YouTube. We've got over 3 million views on YouTube. I don't exactly know what the parameters are, but I have been told we are in the top 10% of something on YouTube as it relates to regularly, weekly, subscriber-based shows, and we have. They can track and see where people watch from. We get people watching from New York and LA and Chicago and Singapore and places internationally. Like, people that love bowling, and there's not a whole lot of bowling programming on. They have gravitated to this show to the point where we're getting qualifiers on the show from outside the Buffalo area, and we're getting guys that are on our show that are being recognized when they go to tournaments tournaments in Las Vegas, people will stop and go, "Aren't you George from Beat the Champ?" Like the people that they don't even know. So it's been really fun for me to learn a different sport. I work with amazing people. Joe Ciccone is our executive producer. Sue Novoisky, that you see there, who is a Buffalo Bowling Hall of Famer, is the color commentator, and she's amazing. And she corrects me when I ask something dumb and doesn't make me look bad. But anything that I need to know or the viewers need to know, it's just my job to ask her.
Good for you. Let's jump back to football a little bit, because here we are, and as we tape this, as I said, we're heading into the Super Bowl. Do you look at this Super Bowl, which is Seahawks versus Patriots, do you look at it as if that Patriots spot should have belonged to the Bills?
Well, I mean, again, it's easy to say that, and I know people feel like it should, but, I've covered the NFL long enough to know that nobody deserves anything, right? And the Bills made enough mistakes in the games that they played to prevent maybe them from being at home in the playoffs. And then in the game at Denver, they made enough mistakes where they weren't good enough to beat another good team. So I don't know that I would agree that it should be there. They certainly had as good an opportunity to be there with the Chiefs and the Ravens and some of those teams out of the way. I know people around here don't want to hear it. The windows don't stay open forever in the NFL.
Well, I was going to ask you about it.
All right, well, then go ahead and ask
There's
first.
talk about the window closing. Is the window closing?
Well,
on
it's
the current
closing.
Bills?
It's closing from what it was in 2020-21, because those players are either not here anymore or they were 25 at the time and now they're 30. It's never going to close for the Bills as long as you have Josh Allen, right? But what's hard to do in the NFL is keep teams together because of the salary cap. And then when you let guys go because of age or salary, you have to replace them via the draft. And if you don't hit on all the draft picks like you did the first time around, that's when you take a step back into things. And now you're at a coaching change, which means things are going to change as well. The NFL's a year-to-year sport. That's why, on average, 4 or 5 teams that were in last place one year are in first place the next year.
And when you talk about the NFL.
Look at the Patriots, back-to-back 4-13 seasons, and they're in the Super Bowl this year.
The NFL, you and I, as we said, we went to Super Bowl 25. Now we're at Super Bowl 60. Somebody's
60.
Getting old.
I think it's 60
Somebody's
now, yeah.
getting old here. But the NFL has changed a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And do you see it continuing its might and power?
It's the behemoth. It's the behemoth of all sports, right? Like, there's a reason why 47 of the 50 highest rated TV shows last year were NFL games, right? It's live television. There's very little live television that makes you sit in front of your TV when they tell you to in the world that we live in now. But the NFL has become such an entertainment product. Sports gambling has helped. Fantasy football has helped. And the games are great, right? Again, one of my pet peeves that I bust all the chops of my friends about is what's great about the NFL is 80% of the games come down to the last 2 minutes. That's amazing drama, amazing television, which is why I tell my friends, stop freaking out about what happened in the first quarter. You watch these games enough to know it doesn't matter. The first half is almost irrelevant. As long as you're within 2 scores in the fourth quarter, you have a chance to win every game.
I feel that way about basketball because I go to a lot of basketball games and they come down to the last few seconds.
And I'll go back to something that Van taught me long ago, which is my sort of my old guy rant a little bit, which is the one thing that I learned very early from Van was it's all about the game. Right? The game meant everything to Van. All that stuff we did on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays was all nice and fun, but it was never more important than the game. And I think now, at the world that we live in, sometimes people feel like all the other stuff is more important than the game itself. The draft, the offseason free agency, the lead up to the press conference, all that stuff. Like it should always be about the game. Nothing should ever be more important than the game itself because the game dictates everything beyond that. But what the NFL is brilliant at is making you care about stuff that has nothing to do with the game from January until August, until September, until the season actually starts.
All right. Taking the NFL and what has filtered down to college basketball, college football, NIL. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed the college athletics landscape completely. They are essentially professional athletes now without really being officially professional athletes.
Is this good or bad for the game?
It's
You
both.
just talked about the game.
There's not a... It's bad if you wanted it the way that it was 10 years ago. It's good if you have a team that can go out and pay 5 new players to come take you from a bad team to a good team, right? That's good. It's bad if those good players that help make you a good team then leave the next year because they can have their pay doubled at a bigger school and you go back to being a bad team, right?
And they even leave during the year. I mean, it's
Yeah,
nuts.
I mean, again, there's always been a disparity in college athletics. The Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Georgias of the world always had more resources and more ability to do things than the UBs, the Canisius, and the Niagaras. It's now become more exposed because it's now just straight money, right? Like, Ohio State can pay $25 million to players to fill their roster out. Maybe UB is going to get close to $1 million, right? It's just they don't generate the revenues that an Ohio State does. So when it strictly becomes a financial transaction, it's not about, hey, I want to go to UB because they have a great education, they have a great campus, I like the coaches, I want to major in something that they offer. There are still kids that do that, and UB is still good about finding them. But ultimately, it's become a transactional sport, and I don't know that it ever was intended to be that. But again, there's too much money on the line. There's the TV networks now rule college athletics because it's programming, and when it's programming, there's money back to the colleges. And it changes the dynamic.
All right. Finally, very quickly, Paul, since we are formerly on 4, is there a story or an event or a person that you met, something that sticks out in your mind about your time here?
Obviously what I said about Van is just my
absolutely.
time here with one of the most amazing sportscasters and personalities and people that I've ever met in my life. The Super Bowls were just a whirlwind of being thrown into this incredible experience of covering these major events from 8 in the morning till midnight. I'll give you one little story, and I'm really proud of this. I did the first ever television interview with Patrick Kane when he was 13 years old.
Oh,
Yeah,
a phenom even
we worked
then.
with somebody from South Buffalo, and the word had spread through South Buffalo. There's this kid who's going to be a phenom. We should go do a story. Great, love it. Went and did a story with him. He was a 13-year-old kid playing on an Empire State Games team full of high school seniors, and he was the best player there. And I haven't seen Patrick in a while, but every once in a while, if I would bump into him around town or you'd see him at a sporting event, he remembers me because I'm the guy that did the first ever TV sports story on it. And I'm really proud of that, and maybe a few other people names throughout the time here where you identified somebody early, did a story on them, made a connection with them, and then you sat back and watched them become amazingly great. Right, that's really something that I get very satisfied about from some of those Channel 4 stories over the years of just being smart enough or having good enough people around me to say, hey, we should go do the story on that person at Williamsville South High School, and you recognize it, and then they wind up going on to become an NFL player, and you can say, hey, I knew them back then.
Paul, I can say, hey, I knew you back then, way back when you first walked in the door. It was always a joy to work with you. We've had great times together.
Same here. Learned a lot from you as well, too.
And it's been a joy watching you grow and blossom into a premier sportscaster in this area.
Thank you. I mean, I've tried my best to adapt to what has been a massively different media world that you and I were in back when I started, and it's become about adaptability, and the play-by-play is one of the few things in the media world that is still the same as it was 30 or 40 years ago. Like I said, they still need you to fill 2 hours without a script. So most of my work is in that realm because I really enjoy that challenge.
Paul, thank you so much for being here today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for watching. We do appreciate it. If there's someone who was formerly on 4 that you would like to know more about, pop me a line, jackie.walker@wivb.com. Thanks so much for being with us today.